When you're ready, I've got the call document pinned in the chat, so you can grab that whenever you're ready, and I will start sharing. Also, when you're ready, please share your link and either your offer or your business in general in the chat to give everybody an opportunity to introduce what they do, since this is a business clarity call.
Okay.
Hello. Good morning, Suliet.
Hi. My camera won't work for some reason, but I'm here.
You are quite all right. I have pinned the doc in the chat, so you can grab that when you're ready. And if you have an offer or your business in general that you'd like to share in the chat, please do so with links. We are just getting started. And what I need to say is that Venus and Pluto are trine right now, and I'm not an astrology expert. I'm still definitely a learner, but they're having a favorable connection right now. And this has absolutely brought up issues of fairness and unearthing old things, bringing what's really poignant and pointy as well, quite pointy things, really, around relationships. My Venus is in Libra, so I'm very much about balance and supporting one another. And when that balance is not there, and we get this Venus and Pluto conspiring together, it's quite a sharp energy. It's very telling, things coming to the surface. All right, we've got Jen's PLR content, private label rights content in the chat. I will copy the chat before we finish if I remember. I think there is also a setting for that, but we'll see at the end. Let's see. Oh, I've got my freebie up in my new software for business. Let me share that. And my freebie is a short workbook for intuitive women in business who are ready to get one question settled so they can move forward and not stay stuck. All right. So our theme this week is refining before the full moon. So rather than adding in a lot of new things, we are adjusting, we are evaluating and shifting instead of a whole bunch of new offers. And that's really a reminder for me too, because I am always coming up with new things. And I'm like, hey, wouldn't it be great if we could balance Legos on our head and then we'll read Uno cards like tarot? And these things happen all day. So it's wild that I get anything done. I think very thankful for appropriate medications and behavioral interventions. Otherwise, those are the offers you would be getting. So with the full moon coming up, we want to bring that full moon power to our best work, which is why we're refining instead of bringing in new things. Right now, the moon is, let's see, our document says 93% illuminated. Let me see if I've got anything more specific. Okay, I've got 96% illuminated. So that was probably from midnight, the 93% in the dock. Meaning we are in a time of looking at balance. And with the full moon, there's also a fullness of feeling and emotions, sometimes activity. An interesting thing that I noticed while I was working in healthcare, I was a patient care technician in a mental hospital for several years. And even though, unfortunately, the unit I was on most of the time only had a little skylight window where people could see out. They could see out of their room windows, but in the general common room, there was only a very small window. And so typically these folks could not see the moon, but around the full moon, um, absolutely the people were more energetic. People who were typically napping, because I was on an older folks unit in the mental hospital, typically napping more, they were up. People who are typically in the recliner watching TV were up to the nurse's station and back. These things, definitely more activity, even when the people were not informed, hey, it's a full moon. So that was interesting to notice. Some people say there's more crime around the full moon, and that's not been shown statistically. But I do believe, because I've seen it in multiple settings, definitely more activity around the full moon. People are a little busier, a little more likely to leave the house. Yeah, Suliet is chiming in. Yes. So that's always something to be aware of. I'm not a big group of people in public kind of person. And so I tend to stay in a little more closer to the full moon because I don't want to be out stirring around with all of the folks. I like small groups. So we're looking at the full moon in Scorpio happening in 2 days. The moon grows about 3% per day while it's waxing, or loses about 3% illumination or fullness per day when it's waning. So that puts us right at nighttime. Yeah, so 6:08 a.m. is what I have in the document. All right, and Suliet's moon is in Scorpio. This will be an energizing time for you. And for all of us with the moon in Scorpio, we can expect some things that have been hidden, whether on purpose or just forgotten, to come to the surface. This is like in the judgment card where you see the coffins rising up, opening up. Things are coming to life, back to life, and to the surface that we may or may not want to do that. But Scorpio is all about it's a water sign, and it's all about communicating with others what we've had hidden. In general, Scorpio is secretive. They've got a lot of deep thoughts and they keep those to themselves. When we're experiencing the full moon, which is an expansive energy, though, with Scorpio, things are coming back to light. And I included a link to one of my favorite astrology sites if you'd like to dig more into the full moon astrology. Crystal Beat Astrology is one of my favorites. You're definitely in a time of building visibility. And today, especially if you've got a business or anything related to marketing or getting people together to listen. Today, because it's a Wednesday, Mercury's day, is a day of communication. And in this 2 days before the full moon, this is also a good time to be sharing what you're doing, because with the full moon, we get that water energy, and that's connecting people, uh, rising emotions, and more communication, more, yeah, people connecting with each other. All right, I was going to use my daily driver Biddy Tarot deck, but I've got the Nightmare Before Christmas, and it matches my shirt. And also, we've been talking about things coming back to life with Scorpio, so I'd like to use this deck today. Oh, nice, the Lunar Tarot. Beautiful. Okay, I'm getting my cards out here. And if you would like to draw along with me and don't have a deck in your document, there is a link to my tarot guide, extensively trained on different sets of meanings, including my personal recordings over the years. Okay, Jen got a new Lenormand deck. Ooh, really cool. Very cool. Love Lenormand. And as always on these calls, you're totally welcome to use tarot, oracle, Lenormand, any system. You're welcome to throw your dice, your bones, show us if you've got bones, because cool, dude. And let's get started. Okay. And what is your magic word box, Jen? I've seen you post about it in your community, and I don't know what it is yet.
Okay, so long time ago, maybe 10 years ago, I took a class from an artist who developed this practice where basically you take a box, any box, whatever box you want, and you decorate it the way that you want it decorated. You can, like, and we did it live together. So people had their paints and people had like paper, like tissue paper, and they were just using glue and all kinds of stuff, markers, all kinds of things. And then what you would do is, and you could do it like right then and there. We did some in session, and then you can gather more words later. But you basically just go through books or magazines or whatever, and you cut out like phrases or words. Like this one,
Mm-hmm.
can you?
The details make the difference.
Yeah, and so you just do the, like, there's large ones and there's little bitty ones in here, and then you use those to connect. Like in her case, it was more of just like a reflection exercise, kind of like a journaling exercise.
Sure.
But I have used it for divination purposes ever since I started it. So that's what that
And
is.
those two purposes overlap too. Definitely,
Sure.
journaling and divination are cousins for me.
Yeah.
I can do one, and that helps with the other. Either order I go in. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. That's
Yeah, absolutely.
a really cool personalized oracle freestyle. Nice. All right, so we are getting ready to draw some cards together. I'm going to do a 4-question group reading, and we'll be revealing some things for the Scorpio moon. Okay. I like to draw all of my cards before I start to read. You're welcome, of course, to shuffle and draw however you do that. And funny tidbit I've shared before on a call. I have been a professional tarot reader for 7 or 8 years, and I just learned how to shuffle properly from my husband, who is a tarot student, in the last probably 4 years. Before, it was just sort of a big mess. They got shuffled, but it just looked, wild, like Edward Scissorhands' hair. Was a mess. All right, so our first question is, where am I overextending? And we've got the Four of Pentacles, Four of Presents here. We see we've got a mouse with his exciting hat, and then he's got little cheese presents. I like cheese presents. And so with the Four of Pentacles, we're often sitting on our treasure and not using it to its full capabilities. In the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith, we see an individual clutching one pentacle, and they're sitting on a chest that contains more pentacles, and they're protecting it rather than circulating the wealth. Wealth wants to move. It wants to go person to person and project to project, supporting different people with the different things they're doing. That is an important step in your own in your money practices, especially in business practices, but for personal finance too. Speaking up about what you want to do with your money, like, hey, money, this is the group I want to serve. This is how I'd like to serve them. I would like more of you to join me so that we can make this happen for more people. And working with money as an entity, almost like a person or um, guide you can communicate with. Speaking up and speaking out is how you get so much more in life, because when there's no direction that you've settled on, then there's no direction. You're just drifting. But when you speak something out loud, the funny thing is, we have the monkey mind that goes on and thinks about all the crazy things and distracts us. But when you speak out loud, your mind shuts up to listen to what your mouth is saying. That's why it's so powerful to speak things out loud, because the brain actually listens and pulls that in as information, not just an action it's doing, but it's news. So we're overextending basically our miserliness. Definitely some Scrooge energy here with keeping things too close to the chest so that they can't circulate like money would like to do. Money wants to flow to you and from you in positive ways. It's about circulation. All right, next up, what feels out of energetic balance? We've got the Five of Wands, and that is, again, the tarot is very to the point. Thank you, Captain Obvious. Five of Wands is absolutely about having conflict and being out of balance. So we have here, I believe they're called Lock, Stock, and Barrel, but I may be incorrect about the characters' names here. But these are characters who kidnapped Santa Claus, Sandy Claus, as he's known in the movie, and Nightmare Before Christmas. And so there's lots of conflict with people being kidnapped and not able to do what they want to do with these characters. The Five of Wands really brings our attention to where our passions may be conflicting with other people's best interests. We have to think about the power of fire, as that's our element for the wands, and think about how our own light affects other people. Because if we are, dimming our light, our wand lit up and glowing, then other people have less light to see. If we're holding that up and being open about our passions and where we're headed, other people can orient by the direction we're headed, whether they want to go with us or a different way. So, out of energetic balance, I want you to consider where you might be imposing your will over someone else, and it's not in the mutual best interests. Or this could also be a reverse situation where someone is imposing their will on you, and it's for you to speak up using your power and state the new conditions. We teach people how to treat us by what we put up with. All right, what needs refinement before the full moon? And we've got the Six of Pentacles. So we're looking at generosity. We've just talked about with the Four of Pentacles being too stingy and not letting our money circulate. And now we've got, okay, we need to refine our generosity, which is the Six of Pentacles or Six of Presents in this deck. In the traditional cards, we see a person who is giving out coins to others who appear below the figure who's being generous. The figure giving out coins also is holding a balance, though. So we're looking at not just giving, but receiving as well. With energy, just like with money, there needs to be a flow, not one direction. That's how you have a car accident. When something's speeding in one direction and nothing else is moving, then you have a problem. But when things like energy and money can flow, they're in their natural cycles where they can wax and wane. So refining where we're giving and receiving. And that can absolutely tie into the previous card being out of balance with the Five of Wands having power conflicts with others. And then our final question, the boundary that protects our value. And we've got the Ace of Swords or Ace of Needles in this deck. The sword is held upright. And of course, there's just one because our aces are ones in tarot. And aces are seeds. They are not the actual meaning of the suit come to life yet. They are potential. So if we feed and water those seeds, they can grow. But you have to have an action that's like watering the seed in the ground before that potential of the ace will bloom into what it is. So our boundary here is our mind. Swords are of the air element, and they're about our mental status, the truth, and our thoughts. So always when we look at swords, we're looking at cutting the bullshit, stopping the mental runaround, and going, what's actually true and real right now? And there's a call with this card to think about what's changed, whether you like it or not, and get real about that. That's going to work in tandem with our Scorpio full moon unearthing things. So if you have been a Pollyanna character, where you're just seeing the positives, this is the time to talk in a real way about what's actually going on. It's okay to admit or state that there's a difference between your desired level and your actual level. That's okay. That's not being negative, and that's not going to stop you from receiving what's meant for you. All right, I am pasting the questions in the chat. Juliet, there you are. And when we were getting the Five of Wands, Juliet got the Five of Pentacles. So conflict all around for question 2, what's out of energetic balance? And which question was it that the 5 cards flipped over together for, Juliet? Okay, so the third question, what needs refinement or adjusting, fine-tuning before the full moon? Juliet got 5 cards, Death, the Queen of Wands, the Sun, Judgment, and the Three of Wands. How interesting. So we're looking at a new beginning, and then the Queen of Wands being a queen of expanding your territory in a sense of that personal power and speaking up. Queens are in a public position, and so their opinions and actions and words are all broadcast publicly. So when we look at queen energy, we're looking at someone who is presenting who and what they are to the public, being upfront about that. And then moving into the sun, we see perhaps looking back over the event that death has ended and restarted for us. Judgment also speaks of endings and looking back over what's happened. The question in the Judgment card, though, and in the Death card, both of them, is what are you going to do moving forward? You've got this knowledge of what's ended. What will you do moving forward now that you know? So there's personal responsibility there in both death and judgment. And ending up with the Three of Wands. So threes are about groups and communication. And we're talking about power, fire, and that's a beautiful fit with the Queen of Wands too. So being in touch with other people, again, being open, that's really a recurring theme, being open about where we're headed, what we're doing, what our purpose is in our business, in our lives. So getting real about all of that is the theme and acting on it. Wands representing fire are not still. Fire is not still. Fire is active. And so it can be creating, reforming, like in welding or blacksmithing, and it can destroy. We decide the direction that it goes. It can destroy and purify. It can destroy and leave everything desolate. I was going to say distraught, but that wasn't quite the word. Desolate, or we can use that fire again, like we are creating something new out of metal. We can use it to forge something greater, something stronger than the original ingredients. And Juliet says she's just started becoming visible in a new way. Wonderful. Yes, excellent. That's perfect energy to go along with the full moon. All right, Jen, do you have any cards to share? Any insights?
So I drew a card and something from the magic word box for each question. So before I even get into that, a lot of this doesn't feel like it's about business because I had a really dramatic life event. Well, 2 of them happened over the last week. And so these are just like hitting me right here about those situations. So I just wanted to be clear about that.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying that these aren't related to business, but that's just not what's happening right now. So, so for the first question, I drew from the Lenormand deck the Tower card. And then I also I drew out a parking receipt from a uh, from like where we had to leave the car at the airport for a
Mhm.
trip at some point. So what I'm taking from that was, so the tower card is all about like solitary, like fortress, kind of building up walls, protection. It can kind of go either way depending on where you are standing in the situation. From my understanding, really hits home in a lot of ways for me right now. And then that parking receipt might seem kind of weird, but the receipt part of it is what really stuck out to me. And like modern slang, when people say receipts, it's like, I can prove that you did this. I can, I can pull up copies of text that you said that. So that's kind of the meaning that jumped out at me with that. So take what you will from that in regards to that first question, even.
Definitely. And I'm also seeing institutions, towers,
Yeah.
institutions are built up over time, including airports and how they run.
Right.
And yeah, I'm
So
with you on the receipts, seeing
yeah,
evidence of what's going on.
yeah, and I'm thinking that like, where am I overextending? When you said, institutions, I think a lot of us small creators try to build our businesses like we are some kind of big corporation, and that's not going to work. Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't work for us because there is only one of us, or, maybe we've got somebody extra on our team. Um, and I think too, sometimes when people are trying to build their community or when they're trying to collaborate with other creators, they try to build it in that corporate type of a structure. And again, that doesn't work, at least not, in this realm. So
Mm-hmm.
just some additional thoughts on that
Yeah.
one. That second question, I had three words get pulled out. My card is the dog, though, and I haven't looked up what that means. I don't remember now.
Faithful friend, faithful
Yeah.
companion.
And then the words are, and again, these just like were like a slap across my head for my personal situation, but it is, what's that say? Sorry. Unlimited access, daydream, and superhero party. Let's see what dog says here.
I see that looking like a personal situation you shared where a relationship was out of balance and you're choosing to move away from that.
Yes, ding, ding, ding. For my personal stuff. So the dog is loyalty, friendship, a follower, devotion, obedience, and support. There's of course like a further meaning. Yeah, all of those things tie into all of the things that happened to me this week. However, like regarding business, that also pops up because I had somebody in our group reflect back that they had bought something recently and used it and was so happy about that. Like she was over the moon. So yeah, there is still some business stuff tied into that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
And then remember
Superhero
the
party. I'm
superhero
still
on the
like
end.
that.
Great minds think alike.
Yeah.
Superhero on the end, I see as you taking back that personal power from that situation where you may have been over giving and over feeling, over efforting. Whereas a superhero, you're able to see from above and you can choose where your power lands.
That is, thank you. Yeah, that's helpful. Um,
It's what I do.
Whew. Okay. So the third draw was the child card, and then the words are the beautiful and good karma. So I kind of read that as one phrase, the beautiful good karma. They don't always do that, but that's how that one hit me. Let's see what the child is.
Innocence and newness is what I get from that Lenormand-wise.
New beginnings, child, toddler, play, inexperience, innocence, immaturity. Again, all of those things, I can kind of see those in that situation. I don't know so much about needing refinement and in my business. I'm not real sure.
I feel like you said at the beginning, this is more personal for you. You're refining what you are innocent about or where you need to mature with what you're accepting from other people.
Yeah, that's probably very true. I can see just like the child and the toddler come into this as well. One of the things is about my mom and her health. So I can, and there is like, I'm not experienced with the situation that we're looking at. I am her child, but I'm also her caregiver in this situation. So there is something out of balance there.
Yeah, role reversal. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, and then the last card I got was the bouquet. I just love the art on this. I'm looking at the wrong screen. Hold on. Okay.
Oh yeah.
They're kind of like art deco type cards. I don't know. Anyway, so bouquet, and I don't have any clue about that one. And then the word was gem. Again, that one I'm not real sure about.
Both serve as gifts.
Yeah. Flattery, social life, pleasantness, cordiality, etiquette, politeness, appreciation. Yeah. Well, I can see how those all fall in there. Joyful and light social interactions are represented by the bouquet. The card indicates that we're being presented with some of life's more pleasant occasions. No, that's not true this week. And we should be taking some time to enjoy them. It indicates that this is a good chance to develop friendships, reach out, and take pleasure in the kind of happiness that others can bring. Yeah, that just leads me to a little bit more confusion about the situation.
Gotcha.
But it says it can also be an expression of gratitude and appreciation. It can be a token of thanks and recognition. And it can be both from sincere feelings or out of social politeness, or sometimes flattery with a hidden and ulterior motive. That fits the situation a little bit better. But so does the gratitude and appreciation when it comes to that stuff with my mom. So yeah. So sorry, it's not so much about business, but this personal stuff has severely impacted my ability to concentrate on business stuff. However, I've been able to use my business stuff to kind of distract me a little bit from that as well. So yeah, all of it ties in.
Yeah, while I was nursing, some of the most difficult days of my life, I went to work because it gave me something else to do with my hands and keep me focused. So you're drawing the bouquet for the boundaries brings up two things for me. It brings up the old meanings of flowers, like the flowers that were associated with birthdays, or herbs like rosemary for remembrance. Tulips are a sign of the fullness of spring coming in. approaching summer. Now the sun is fuller, it's warmer. And then also a biblical reference. I'm not a religious person. I was in a religious situation for about 20 years of my life. So the flowers don't worry about where things are going to come from. They just grow when they're in the right conditions, when they have what they need, which is super simple: water and sunlight. They've got the energy coming in, the fire, and then balance with that water. And so they're able to create their own plant life out of those two simple things. And flowers don't wilt going, well, or they do rather. Flowers wilt going, well, where is my next, rainfall? Where is the next sun? We're just going to be droopy. But when things are provided, there's no questioning from flowers. They don't droop in sun when they've had plenty of rain too. They are ready, open, active. They're actively producing energy from what they're receiving. And in that, for the bouquet and the boundary, I see that protecting what you are building for yourself, both personally and business wise. I see those as boundaries coming into place where you recognize that some gifts are not truthful and not sincere, but also back to your superhero, you've got some really strong intuitive gifts, and these show up clearly in your business, in your offerings. And so recognizing those, you're giving a token of appreciation to yourself, which is much needed for all that you do.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. Thank you for allowing me to interpret and walk with you on that. Thank you, Juliet. All right. Take your time and breathe. Feel what you need to feel. And I'm going to guide us to the next section in our document. The free business tool of the week is the Abundance Guide. This is an AI assistant I created that takes your human design and your astrology to look at your gifts through both of those lenses and see where you might turn those into income. So it's a fun tool, and it will likely give you a few ideas you might not have considered. So we have recommended communities that I like to mention on each call. First is my community, the Intuitive Business Collective, is a free school, and I provide nervous system support and business energetics for intuitive business owners. So there I am. We are working on calm visibility strategies and energetic workings like reading tarot or divination and other energetic elements. Will soon be moving into some magic practices that support business, and I'm really excited about that slight shift in direction. So Jen's group, where I'm also supporting, is the Crossroads Collective. It's for entrepreneurs blending magic and strategy. Jen is more focused on the practical aspects, I feel like, than I am, while still holding the intuitive up high and as important. One of my favorite groups is Explore Your Woo. My business coach Sadie runs that group, and she is into all things star seeds, soul families, aliens specifically, and she is either learning or has learned so many of the things, nearly all the things. She's into and certified in Reiki. She's getting her Akashic Records certification through the same school I went to. And she is using a new healing modality that she's created. So that's been really interesting to learn about. She documents every step of her journey, and she gets a lot of very interesting visions and such. Things that push boundaries in how you may have considered things before. So, mind opening. Business Astrology Hub is by Carolina. She is the astrologer I work with when I have personal astrology questions. And she is also in the top high percentages of school groups with her school. That's not the proper name, but that's what it's about, growing your school. So Carolina is a good one to learn from and watch how she manages and interacts with her community if you're interested in growing your group. And finally, Mystical Moon Sisters is a free community where Jessica is pulling cards and connecting meaning to the phases of the moon. She is layering the moon phases over working out a business and personal rhythm. So tying things together and really working with that flow and ebb of how things are and where's the best use of your energy during a certain moon phase is a perfect question for Jess. All right. Does anyone have more they want to share? Any questions, complaints, peanuts to throw? All right. Thank you both so much for being here. I appreciate both of your interaction. Makes this much more interesting. All right. And take care, Jen.
Thank you.
Resting well and doing things that are just for you, even if it's just for a moment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Juliet. See you next time.